China is refusing to negotiate with President Trump on U.S. tariffs.
Confirmed that U.S. tariffs against China add up to 145%.
News that China is striking back retaliatory tariffs, big ones.
China is now warning other countries not to strike trade deals with the U.S. that would impact Chinese interests.
A 95% crash in American sorghum exports to China. Can you imagine? This single staggering figure has rural America on the edge. An omen of a crisis few saw coming. The administration insists that the solution lies in China's hands, declaring that it's Beijing's responsibility to seal a trade deal or face the consequences.
Beijing has given no public indication that they're willing to come to the table and negotiate. They have been defiant.
Yet behind these bold pronouncements, a new wave of tariffs, reportedly as high as 125%, took effect this April 2025, amplifying tensions in ways no one anticipated. China is our main buyer, and we need them far more than they need us, some experts caution. But the administration's stance remains unmoved. There is talk about the United States walking away if a favorable deal doesn't materialize. The notion sounds powerful, a show of resolve, a symbol of national pride. Still, quiet fears linger. What if China, amid this standoff, learns to do without U.S. markets altogether?
Attention getting to me is the fact that China is now saying it's not going to raise tariffs any higher, saying it has other weapons, almost making fun of the United States for raising the stakes, raising the numbers so high.
It's no idle threat. Over the past 4 months, China has steadily imposed not just tariffs, but also a string of bureaucratic blockades. Shipments of American beef, poultry, and liquefied natural gas have grown tangled in layers of red tape. Some researchers say these tactics, often labeled non-tariff barriers, can be even more destructive than the more publicized customs duties. They're sticky, insidious hurdles that gnaw away at export demand, sometimes for good. And while the administration points to a strong U.S. economy, the underlying numbers paint a more fragile picture. They reveal a billion-dollar deficit that continues to climb and millions of jobs lost since the late 1990s. If winning a trade war was the objective, the cost so far seems to rest heavily on the shoulders of Middle America. All of this raises a disquieting question. If China doesn't blink, what does that mean for countless farms across the heartland? The White House stance suggests unwavering resolve, as if the crisis is merely a test of endurance. In the meantime, communities on the ground are bracing for what feels like a slow-moving economic quake. The results are already visible. Sorghum once traveled to Chinese ports in vast ships laden with hope and profit. Now silos in Kansas and Texas overflow with unsold grain. Machinery sits idle, onions of dust forming under wheels that haven't budged for weeks. The fields remain planted, some out of habit, some out of desperate hope. But exports? They've plummeted, a bitter testament to how swiftly international relationships can sour. It's not just sorghum. Soybean farmers, especially those who relied heavily on the Chinese market, have watched their livelihood unravel. The so-called feeding the dragon boom, which once fueled expansions in the Midwest, has sputtered to a near standstill. Official numbers confirm it. From the White House's perspective, the solution is for China to comply.
China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. There's no difference between China and any other country, except they are much larger.
Yet from farmers' vantage point, Chinese buyers have already found substitutes. Brazil's ports are bursting at the seams, with soybean-laden vessels queued up along the coastline. Argentinian producers, too, are becoming favorites in Beijing's eyes, leveraging the moment to secure long-term contracts. Meanwhile, experts tracking these trade flows warn that new deals forged in times of crisis can become lasting partnerships. Once trust erodes between buyer and seller, it can be agonizingly difficult to repair. China, these analysts say, no longer sees American agriculture as a stable cornerstone, but as a risk factor in an ongoing chess match, something to be avoided just in case the White House decides to turn tariffs into a weapon yet again. For families in the heartland, the emotional toll hits almost as hard as the financial devastation. There is silence, many say. Machinery is idle, silos are full, contracts are void. That's more than an economic problem. It's a blow to the entire rural way of life. Questions hang thick in the air. What if the world moves on and forgets about American grain? Who's left standing when a once reliable partner disappears for good? In countless small towns, local economies revolve around a single commodity, be it sorghum, soybeans, or corn. Now, a wave of bankruptcies shadows farmers across the Midwest, from Nebraska's plains to the rolling fields of Iowa.
Thought I was going to lose this much money, this fast.
Some are calling this the worst crisis in agricultural exports since the 1980s farm bust. Domestic inventories, according to recent figures, are up dramatically, 40% or more in some cases. It's a haunting sight. Entire storage complexes packed to capacity, with no sign of a buyer on the horizon. Farmers have begun planting crops they cannot hope to sell at decent prices, simply to keep their equipment running and retain a glimmer of hope for government assistance. In the background, older tariffs, those introduced during the first Trump administration, still linger, piling additional burdens on top of the new duties. Each layer of policy creates another obstacle. Each passing day feels like a lost opportunity to regain foreign buyers who, in the meantime, are signing multi-year deals with newfound suppliers. Yes, government bailout proposals have emerged as stopgap measures. Multi-billion-dollar relief packages make headlines. Yet when you talk to the farmers themselves, those who watch the changing sky over idle fields, they'll tell you that short-term aid can't resurrect long-lost trust and goodwill. The fractured relationship with China cannot be repaired merely with a check. If Beijing has truly moved on, no emergency package from Washington can restore that demand overnight. So the frustration grows. Rural families find themselves outsiders at their own bargaining table, with no seat, no voice, and no recourse. Even if the aid comes, the refrain goes, it will not undo the long-term damage. The fear is now personal, palpable. It extends beyond one bad year or a single lost season. It threatens the entire structure of hometown life built on agriculture. China, it seems, has reached a tipping point. Observers point to a comprehensive realignment of its buying habits. Beijing is hastening trade agreements with Brazil, investing in logistics across Africa, and even pouring money into Russian farmland. The global marketplace, once heavily dependent on America's vast supply, is recalibrating to new realities. To some farmers, it's like watching a longtime friend walk away, leaving them standing under the scorching sun. You had your chance, some Chinese officials have implied, and you used trade as a weapon. Now we're forging new paths. The sense of betrayal in rural communities is raw, and it comes with a jolt of fear. Is it possible that this pivot is permanent? Analysts warn that while large-scale deals can be undone, the trust bubble is not so easily renewed. International buyers are not simply playing for immediate gain. They are playing for security, consistency, and strategic partnerships that stretch into the next decade. The marketplace is about relationships. Break them, and the consequences can reverberate for years. Add to that more constraints and potential trade disputes over semiconductors or rare earth metals, and you have a global chessboard where the U.S. is losing influence move by move. All the while, countries like the European Union members, South Korea, and Taiwan watch from the sidelines, stepping in to capitalize on the vacuum. As Washington tightens tariffs, other nations sweeten their deals. Brazil's agribusiness sees windfall profits. African nations that partner with Chinese infrastructure projects now enjoy a direct channel to one of the world's largest markets. The United States, once the unrivaled agricultural powerhouse, suddenly appears isolated, caught in an economic crossfire of its own making. So where does that leave America's heartland? The calls for policy revisions are growing louder each day. Some lawmakers, alarmed by the plight of their own constituents, argue for rolling back tariffs on strategic crops to reignite trade. Others see strategic exemptions as the key, believing that farmers should not be pawns in a broader economic standoff. Meanwhile, a deepening sense of urgency grips those towns perched on the edge of collapse, where every lost sale means another business closing, another family leaving. Analysts warn that if Washington and Beijing fail to reach a compromise soon, the crisis could expand beyond the fields. It might ripple across manufacturing, shipping, banking, everything tied to the agricultural chain. Indeed, the very notion of feeding the world seems overshadowed by political brinkmanship and retaliatory strikes. It's not hard to picture an economic aftershock that spreads through stock markets, erodes investor confidence, and clamps down on growth across continents. Time is running short. The newly enacted tariffs have gone into effect. The next step, if none of the two powers budge, might be yet another spike in retaliation. None of this soothes the anxiety of real people trying to survive in the here and now. If farmers lose this battle for global relevance, what happens to the rest of us? Raise your voice, some advocates say. Share these stories, support the journalists exposing the everyday tragedy behind hollow policy wins, and watch carefully for legislative proposals that might offer a lifeline. That's the rallying cry: awareness, vigilance, and a collective push to protect the communities that feed the nation. It might sound idealistic, but for folks living on the front lines, it's better than no hope at all. In the end, the harshest truth is that markets don't wait for political squabbles to conclude. Grain spoils, opportunities vanish. And while bailouts can patch a wound, they can't revive the spirit of a region that feels replaceable. Dwindling optimism hangs in the air like a thick haze, leaving everyone to wonder, when the dust settles, will rural America ever find its footing again? If these questions resonate, keep your eyes on the latest developments. Support independent reporting. Look beyond the headlines for the people whose fate hangs in the balance. Because this crisis, in every way, is more than just a trade war. It's a direct threat to the heart of a nation's breadbasket. And stopping it, or at least softening the blow, may demand more than any one politician or policy can provide. The greatest question is, who will act before the silence spreads to the heart of the nation itself?